He said it loud enough for the whole room to hear. My grandson, grinning, champagne in hand, looked straight at me and sneered, "Old soldiers don't matter." The laughter that followed wasn't cruel. It was worse. It was polite. Like the world had quietly agreed I'd already served my purpose. I didn't speak, didn't stand, didn't defend myself. Because some lessons don't need arguments. They need witnesses. He thought the night was his. But what he didn't know was that a military band was already waiting outside, and when those doors opened, every person in that hall would remember exactly what old soldiers are made of. Before I show you what happened next, make sure you're subscribed with the bell turned on, and drop a comment telling me where you're watching from. Because tonight's story, it's not about medals. It's about memory. Now let's get into it. They called it a joint ceremony. Half for the town's student achievers, half for the veterans who'd kept this place free long before most of those kids were born. To me, it just felt like oil and water sharing the same bowl. I only went because my daughter insisted. "Dad, it'll mean a lot to Evan if you're there," she'd said. Evan, my grandson, 18, sharp dresser, the kind of confidence you get when you've never had to doubt anything. So there I was, sitting in the community center under buzzing LED lights, breathing in reheated catering and too much cologne. At one end, some brass players were unpacking trumpets and tuning up. My blazer hadn't fit right in years, but I'd pinned my old unit insignia to the lapel anyway. Habit. Before I show you what happened when that military band marched into the hall and my grandson realized what he'd actually said, drop a comment telling me where you're watching from, hit that subscribe button with the bell turned on. Now let's dive deeper into it. Evan stood near the refreshment table with two of his classmates. Tall kids, expensive haircuts, easy smiles. He was showing them something on his phone. I could hear him over the noise. "My granddad's here for the vet thing. Yeah, the old-timer group." One of his friends laughed. "Come on, man." "Hey, no offense," Evan added, glancing my way. "But old soldiers had their time. Tonight's about us, the living generation." He grinned when he said it. They all chuckled like it was clever. I felt the words hit, light but sharp. I'd been shot at, burned, buried men younger than him. But that kind of sting still found its mark. I didn't say anything, just looked down at the small folded flag pin I keep in my pocket. The edges are worn smooth from years of rubbing my thumb over it whenever I need to steady myself. Helen gave it to me after my last deployment, said, "Keep it close when you can't keep me." Marjorie caught the tension right away. She hurried over, smoothing her dress like she could iron out the moment. "Dad, don't take it personally. You know how teenagers are." "Yeah," I said quietly. "I used to train them." She forced a laugh. "The polite kind you use to fill a silence that's gone wrong." Evan noticed and shifted his weight like he might apologize, but the moment passed. The MC tapped the microphone, calling everyone to their seats. I sat toward the back with a row of older vets I didn't know. They nodded politely. In front of us, the students and their parents filled the front tables, phones out, ready to record their bright futures. I watched Evan lean toward his friends again, laughing about something I didn't catch. Didn't matter. I'd learned a long time ago that dignity doesn't need an audience. Still, sitting there among the polite chatter, I could feel the space between us like a wall of glass. We could see each other clear as day, but neither side could hear what the other was really saying. When the lights dimmed for the opening speech, I adjusted my blazer, touched the flag pin once more, and told myself to breathe easy. I don't like to hover near the stage. When the first round of speeches kicked off, I slipped to the edge of the hall where the light thinned out. Along the far wall, someone had set up foam boards with black and white photos. I followed the grid until I found myself. Young, square-jawed, bars still new on my collar. I stood there a while, listening to the room behind me. Cutlery chiming, a burst of applause, the shy laugh of a freshman who'd just been called brilliant for surviving high school. A teenage volunteer came by, thin shoulders under a too-big event shirt, lanyard bouncing against his chest. He slowed when he saw the photo and then looked at me harder than kids usually look. "Sir, were you really in combat?" he asked. "I was," I said. He nodded like he'd expected me to say no. Before I could ask his name, he was off, trotting toward the dessert table, already raising a hand for a fist bump from a friend. Good kid, probably, just living in a world that uses the word deploy for software. I eased onto a folding chair beside the display. From here, the ceremony looked like a movie without sound. People moved their mouths and adjusted their jackets. The brass players in the corner set out valve oil and mouthpieces with the kind of care doctors use, laying steel on cloth. I reached into my pocket and rubbed the flag pin again, then the smooth ridge of the coin I carry from my last command. Helen used to tease me about it. "You rattle like a pocket full of marbles when you're anxious," she'd say. Then she'd tuck the coins into a little dish by the door so I couldn't take them everywhere. She pressed the creases in my dress blues with a damp towel and a patient hand, talking to me like I wasn't a bundle of nerves pretending to be steel. The last time I wore that uniform, the house still smelled like her lavender soap. My back looked straighter in the mirror because she was standing behind me, telling me I looked handsome. I haven't put the blues on since we buried her. Couldn't stand to see the jacket without her reflection over my shoulder. "One day Evan will understand," she'd told me after some teenage shrug or forgotten call. "Not because you scold him into it, Thomas, because life will put weight in his hands, and he'll feel what you've carried." I told her maybe the world had changed too much for that. She just smiled the way she did when she knew I was wrong, and time would prove it for her. A cymbal hissed softly as someone adjusted it. The sound pulled me sideways in memory the way senses do when the past is closer than the present. For a breath, the hall went thin, and I was back where heat moves slow, and the ground shakes right before the sky learns to scream. We were pinned under a sky gone white with dust, a convoy strung out along a ribbon of road that liked to collect trouble. Mortars landed close, closer than training gives you permission to imagine. A young private named Axelrod went stiff as a post, eyes wide, rifle hanging slack like he'd forgotten its name. His hands were shaking, thumbs not doing what he told them. He kept saying, "Sergeant, what do I do? What do I do?" I took his face in my palms. "Breathe, then count. 1, 2, 3. Safety, mag, bolt, eyes." I counted with him. The world doesn't slow because you need it to, but your breathing can, and sometimes that's enough to make your hands remember their work. The next round landed farther off. We moved. Afterwards, when the dust settled, he sat on his haunches and cried without sound, shoulders jumping. I put my hand on his neck until the trembling had something to push against. Said nothing. Words don't fix what shock breaks. Steadiness does. Back in the hall, a high laugh snapped me back. I watched the MC gesture toward a slideshow of smiling teenagers, the future packaged with a bow. Marjorie sat near the front, hands folded tight in her lap, the way Helen used to twist her wedding band when nerves took hold. She caught my eye across the room and tried to smile. I nodded to tell her I was fine, even if something inside me had started to lean. Closer to the stage, Evan stood with his friends, all trim angles and borrowed confidence. He made a show of clapping for a boy who'd built an app that tells you when your plants are thirsty. Good for him. I'm not against cleverness. I'm just suspicious of any future that thinks cleverness and wisdom are the same tool. A little girl in red patent shoes drifted away from her table and stopped at the photos. She traced the edge of a frame with one finger, then looked back at her father and waved. He waved back without looking up from his phone. The girl mouthed something I couldn't hear, then skipped back across the linoleum, shoes tapping like a metronome. I stood and set the folding chair back under the table. My knees complained the way they do when the weather's about to change. The brass players were seated now, straight-backed, eyes on the conductor. The snare tapped a quiet rudiment that sounded like rain starting. From the front of the room came another bubble of laughter. Evan's voice rode on top of it, a little louder than it needed to be, the way a boy talks when he's trying to outrun a silence he doesn't recognize yet. I breathed in, let the air sit heavy in my chest, and turned toward the sound. I smoothed my blazer and began to make my way back toward the noise. They'd set the tables in tight rows so nobody could move without scraping a chair leg. When I got back to my seat, the speeches were in full swing. Local politicians, school administrators, a few business owners talking about bridges between generations. Words that sound good when you don't plan to cross them yourself. Marjorie waved me toward the front. "Dad, come sit closer so Evan can see you." I shook my head. The vets at my table had left a chair open for me. I preferred that space between me and the lights. Up front was for people still rehearsing how to stand tall. Evan's name was next. He straightened his tie, gave his friends that grin of someone already halfway to the future, and climbed the small stage to polite applause. He accepted a plaque. Future leaders of the community. The MC handed him the mic. He started well. Thanks to teachers, a few jokes about late-night studying, his friends laughed on cue. He glanced once toward his mother, smiled for her camera, scanned the audience until he found me. Our eyes met for half a second. I gave a small nod the way soldiers do when there's nothing left to say but steady. He looked away. Then the colonel on the committee, white hair, crisp posture that hadn't surrendered to age, stepped forward. "We owe a debt to the men and women who built this country's backbone," he said, "especially our veterans. Their service is why our youth get to dream this big." The crowd clapped softly. The colonel smiled, turning back toward Evan. "And I'm sure your grandfather, Sergeant Major Keene—" Evan lifted the mic and cut in, laughing. "Yeah, but we can't live in the past forever, right? No offense, but old soldiers don't really matter anymore. We've got AI and drones now." The sound hit the air like glass shattering under carpet, muted but unmistakable. Nervous laughter rippled through the students' section. A few parents joined in, unsure which way politeness was supposed to lean. The colonel froze mid-turn. The brass players in the corner went still, hands hovering above their instruments. Marjorie's voice came out as a hiss. "Evan!" She reached for his sleeve, but he only shrugged, trying to ride the laugh he'd started. I didn't move right away. I just stared at him, the stage lights painting him too bright to look human. The same boy who used to climb into my lap asking for stories about the jungle now smirked at the idea that any of it mattered. Forks stopped. One of the vets at my table muttered under his breath, "Kids today." The colonel cleared his throat into the microphone, but no words followed. The silence thickened until even the band seemed afraid to breathe. I set my napkin on the table, folded once. My chair scraped back just loud enough to draw eyes. I stood, straightened my blazer, and gave the colonel a single nod. A silent, "You don't have to fix this." Then I walked. Between the tables, past the gleam of half-empty glasses and the faces trying not to stare. No one stopped me. No one knew how. The doors opened with that long metal sigh of hinges needing oil. Outside, the air was cold enough to bite. It felt clean, honest. I breathed deep and let the frost scrape the taste of the hall off my tongue. For a while I just stood there under the yellow glow of the streetlight, watching my breath curl away like smoke. Somewhere inside, the MC was fumbling to restart the program, his voice tinny through the wall. I could still hear the faint buzz of laughter from Evan's table. Carried on like nothing had happened. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A number I hadn't seen in years flashed on the screen. Captain Henry Marshall. I'd almost forgotten he directed the local reserve band, the same one booked to close out tonight. His text was short. "Still coming, Sarge? We're setting up in 10. I stared at the message for a moment, then looked back at the hall. The windows glowed warm, like a world sealed off from consequence. My fingers hovered over the keyboard. For the first time that evening, I felt something steadier than humiliation. Not anger. Focus. The kind that used to find you right before a mission when you realized there was still one move left to make. I typed back 3 words. "I'll be there." The reply came fast. "Copy that." I slipped the phone into my pocket, drew one last breath of cold air, and squared my shoulders. I'd been quiet long enough. It was time to remind them what silence could carry. The alley behind the community center was half-lit by a flickering security bulb that buzzed like it was thinking too hard. I followed the sound of instruments being unpacked. Metal clinking, muted chatter, the faint whiff of valve oil and cold brass. Henry Marshall stood by the truck, clipboard in hand, posture still military straight. He hadn't changed much. Same square jaw, same clipped tone. Time had drawn fine lines around his eyes, the kind you earn from squinting through too many sunrises in bad places. "Jesus, Tommy Keene," he said when he spotted me. "You still know how to walk, like you've got a mission." I managed a small smile. "Guess muscle memory doesn't care about retirement." He clasped my shoulder, firm and familiar. "Heard you were coming tonight. Didn't expect to see you this early." "Things moved along," I said. "Didn't feel like sticking around for the speeches." Marshall caught the tone. He didn't push. He'd seen enough men carrying something invisible to recognize the shape of it. "You okay?" Define okay. That earned a quiet grunt. He set the clipboard aside. "What happened?" I told him. Not in detail. Just the truth stripped to bone. "My grandson stood on that stage and said old soldiers don't matter." Room laughed. He winced like I'd hit him with shrapnel. "Kid said that?" 18. Smart as they come. Thinks the world started with Wi-Fi. Marshall rubbed his jaw. "They don't mean harm, most of them. Just think the wars ended when the news stopped covering them." I nodded. "They forget what came before, made what they stand on now." For a long moment we stood in silence. The only sounds were instruments being tuned and a drumhead being tightened somewhere in the dark. Then Marshall looked at me sideways. "What do you want to do about it?" "I'm not looking to shame him," I said. "But I'm not walking out of here like a ghost either. You've got that band inside, men who wore the same mud, bled the same dirt. Maybe it's time someone reminded them what respect sounds like." Marshall's mouth curved into a slow grin. "You want a march?" I shrugged. "Something quiet, honest, the kind that doesn't need an introduction." He nodded once. "We've got the medley ready for the finale. But we could start with a tribute instead. The Fallen Roll. I keep that list in the case. Names of locals who never came home. We play the march as they scroll on screen." I looked at him. "Still got that projector file?" "Every year," he said. "Never got to use it this time. Organizers said it'd dampen the mood." "Then let's dampen it." Marshall barked a low laugh. "You serious?" I met his eyes. "Serious as I ever was." He turned toward his players. "All right, folks, change of plans. Formation 3. Medley with the roll call intro. Follow my count. No rehearsal." A chorus of "Roger that, sir," rose from the shadows. Trumpets gleamed under the yellow light, trombones shifted in their cases, and the percussionist, a woman maybe in her 40s, adjusted her beret with quiet precision. Marshall looked back at me. "You still got your colors?" I nodded toward my car. "In the trunk, along with the medals." "Fetch them," he said. "We'll give them something to remember." I walked across the lot, boots clicking on cracked pavement, the night wind threading cold fingers through my collar. My car sat alone under the far lamp, old, scratched, dependable. I popped the trunk and lifted the shadow box wrapped in a folded towel. Inside were the medals, the flag, a photo of the men from Charlie Company, all sunburned smiles and missing teeth. I'd kept it sealed for years, but the glass still caught the light like it wanted to be seen. When I turned, Marshall was waiting by the door, coat draped over one arm. He didn't say anything, just looked at what I was carrying and gave a short nod. The kind of respect that doesn't need words. I adjusted the strap on the duffel and checked my reflection in the window glass. The man staring back looked older, sure, but not small. Helen always said there's a difference. "Ready?" Marshall asked. "As I'll ever be." We started toward the double doors, steps slow and deliberate. From inside I could hear the muffled drone of another speech, the clink of cutlery, a few bursts of polite laughter. Nobody knew the air was about to change. Marshall paused with his hand on the handle. "You sure you don't want me to say anything first?" "Just play," I said. "Let the music do the talking." He nodded. "Aye, Sarge." We stepped inside. Two old soldiers moving through a corridor of noise and light, carrying a memory heavy enough to make the air shift. I followed Marshall's lead as the band took their positions at the side of the hall, unnoticed for now. I placed the duffel down beside me, resting my hand on the edge of the shadow box. The feel of the glass was cool, solid, grounding. From across the room, Evan was laughing again, head tilted back under the lights. I watched him for a moment, not with hate, but with a strange, quiet sadness. He didn't know yet what it costs to be so sure of yourself. Marshall raised his baton. The band fell still. In that hush before the first note, I felt Helen beside me again, the way she used to stand at my shoulder whenever something difficult needed doing. I straightened my back. The sound started low, just a single snare, a heartbeat in the quiet. You could feel it before you saw it, a tremor under the polished floors. The chatter at the tables softened, then stopped altogether when the trumpets joined in, one by one, like breath finding form. The MC froze mid-sentence. The projector flickered to life behind him, names appearing in white text on a black field, one after another, dozens of them. The lights dimmed, unplanned. The band's uniforms, navy coats with gold trim, caught the glow from the screen like moving fire. At the center of it all, Henry Marshall stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Ladies and gentlemen," he said evenly, "before our closing medley, we'd like to honor those who made this night possible. The men and women whose service built the ground we're standing on." He didn't have to say more. Every person in the hall understood this wasn't on the program. I stayed near the entrance, duffel at my feet, hands clasped behind my back the way I used to stand during roll call. The first trumpet took a breath, and the melody that followed wasn't festive. It was the kind of tune that makes the air remember. As the march deepened, Henry gestured subtly toward me. A soft spotlight followed his cue, washing across the crowd until it found me standing alone. Dozens of faces turned. Forks paused mid-air. Even the kids who'd been whispering went still. Henry's voice carried, steady as command. "This is Sergeant Major Thomas Keene, U.S. Army, retired, decorated for valor in Vietnam and the Gulf. A man who's spent a lifetime teaching younger soldiers what courage looks like and reminding this town what it costs." I didn't move, didn't wave. I reached down, lifted the shadow box from the duffel, and held it level in both hands. The light caught the medals, Bronze Star, Purple Heart, a line of ribbons that told a story most people never asked to hear. Beneath them, the folded flag gleamed soft blue under the hall lights. The band swelled. Horns, then the bass drum. The army goes rolling along. Every veteran in the back row stood without needing a cue. Some saluted, others just placed their hands over their hearts. The applause started hesitant. One person, then another, until the whole room was clapping. Not loud, but unified, a kind of rhythm you could feel in your chest. From the stage, Henry raised his free hand for quiet. "Sergeant Major Keene didn't ask for this, but sometimes respect needs to be reminded what it sounds like." He let the silence hang. Then, softly, "This one's for the soldiers who never stopped serving, even when the world stopped noticing." The trumpets hit the chorus again, bright and clean. I felt the vibration through my shoes, through the floor, all the way to my bones. I hadn't felt that alive in years. Near the front, Marjorie was crying quietly, clutching her napkin like she needed something to hold, and there, just behind her, stood Evan. The smirk was gone. His mouth moved once, like he was about to say something, but no sound came. He looked small in that moment, not weak, just young, the way boys look when they realize the world existed before them. I didn't meet his eyes. I looked instead at the veterans across the hall, the ones standing straight despite canes and bad knees. I nodded once. They nodded back. The silent language of men who understand the same kind of ache. The song ended with one long-held note. Then the final drum roll, sharp, deliberate. And the room erupted again, this time with applause that didn't feel polite. It felt earned. Henry turned toward me and offered a salute. I returned it. The motion came naturally, crisp as ever. My arm steadied on instinct, and for a brief second, time folded. I could almost smell the red dust of some faraway road, hear the crackle of a radio through static. When I lowered my hand, the hall was still clapping. People rose to their feet. Even the MC, looking flustered, was applauding now. The students followed one by one until every person in that room was standing. Evan stepped forward a little, voice small but clear. "Grandpa." That was all he managed before it caught in his throat. I gave him one quiet nod. Not forgiveness, not yet, but acknowledgement. The kind that says, "I hear you." Marjorie wiped her eyes and smiled through the tears. Even the colonel at the committee table gave a low, approving grin. The crowd began to settle, the sound thinning back into murmurs. I placed the shadow box gently back into the duffel and zipped it closed. The brass section shifted to a softer hymn. Eternal Father, strong to save, a closing piece Henry always played for the fallen. I turned before the final verse, moving toward the doors while the last notes floated behind me. As the music carried me out, I felt the warmth of the lights fade to the cool air of the corridor. I didn't look back. The lesson wasn't in the speech or the salute. It was in the silence that followed, the kind that forces people to remember what they almost forgot. Outside, the night waited. I stood for a moment under the flagpole, the winter wind tugging at the edges of my blazer, and listened to the final echo of the march drifting through the doors. The night had gone still by the time I stepped outside, the kind of stillness that settles after music ends, when the last vibration fades and you're left with only your heartbeat. The flag above the community center moved just enough to whisper, edges catching a faint breeze. I sat down on a concrete bench near the flagpole and let the cold settle into my knees. My blazer smelled faintly of brass polish and winter air. The duffel sat beside me, the shadow box inside, silent and patient. I'd barely taken a breath when the doors creaked open behind me. Footsteps. Fast at first, then slowing. I didn't turn. I knew the rhythm of those steps before I heard his voice. "Grandpa." Evan's tone wasn't sharp this time. It was the sound of someone realizing the floor they stood on wasn't as solid as they thought. He stopped a few feet away, hands jammed into his pockets, shoulders hunched against the cold. "I didn't mean it like that," he said quietly. "What I said inside. I was just joking. Everyone was laughing and—" I looked out at the flag instead of at him. "Sure you did," I said. "You meant it the way most people do when they think no one's listening." He swallowed hard, breath fogging in the air. "I guess I just didn't understand." "That's usually how respect disappears," I said. "Not with hate, just with not understanding." He took a step closer. "I do now, I think." "Do you?" I asked, turning finally to meet his eyes. He looked younger than I'd ever seen him, like a boy wearing a suit 2 sizes too big. "Because respect isn't about applause. It's about knowing what came before you. The quiet stuff people built while nobody was filming." He nodded once, eyes glistening. "I saw how they stood for you in there. I didn't know people still cared like that." "They don't," I said, not unkindly. "Not until someone reminds them why they should." For a moment, neither of us spoke. The wind shifted, bringing the faint echo of the band packing up. Cases closing, muffled laughter, a lone trumpet testing a note before silence took over again. Evan looked at the duffel beside me. "Those were your medals, right?" I nodded. "What's left of them?" Can I see? I hesitated, then unzipped the bag and lifted out the shadow box. The glass caught the reflection of the flag above us. He leaned in, eyes tracing the ribbons, the bronze star, the folded flag. I didn't realize, he started, then stopped. I just thought that it was all stories, I finished for him. Most people do until life hands them their own. He nodded slowly. Mom said you never liked to talk about the war. I like talking about Helen better, I said. The war just got in the way of her stories. That made him smile a little. She sounds like someone I would have liked. You would have, I said. She'd have told you to keep your shoes polished and your words softer. He laughed once, short and broken. Then, more seriously, I'm sorry, Grandpa. Really, I was stupid. I shook my head. You were young. There's a difference. I stood, stretching the stiffness out of my legs, and looked him square in the eyes. When you earn your own uniform, any kind, you'll understand what it means to stand for something bigger than yourself. Until then, just remember what you saw tonight. He nodded again, his breath hitching. I will. We stood there for a while in silence, watching the flag ripple against the night sky. When the wind died down, I put a hand on his shoulder, firm but not heavy. Go help your mother, I said. She's probably wondering where you ran off to. He hesitated, then said softly, Are you coming? Not tonight, I said. I've already said what I needed to. He nodded, started to turn, then stopped. Grandpa? Yeah. Thank you. For the reminder. I just gave a small nod. Don't thank me. Just do better. He walked back toward the doors. Shoulders lower now, pace slower. When he disappeared inside, I sat again. The bench creaked under me. The lot was nearly empty. Just the band's truck idling near the curb, Henry leaning against it, waiting. When our eyes met, he gave a two-fingered salute. I returned it. No words needed. He climbed in, tail lights fading into the dark, until there was nothing left but quiet. I placed the shadow box on the passenger seat of my car before getting in. The metals caught the glow from the dashboard, the flag reflecting faintly in the windshield. For a long moment I just sat there, hands on the wheel, listening to the engine idle. The boy was wrong, sure, but not cruel, just lost the way people get when the world moves too fast to look backward. I looked at the medals once more and said it softly to the empty car. Maybe to Helen, maybe to myself. Old soldiers don't matter, maybe not to everyone, but tonight they remembered, and that's enough. I put the car in gear, turned onto the road, and let the headlights carve two steady lines through the darkness ahead. Would you have walked away like I did, or turned around and taught that lesson right there in the hall? And tell me this. Do you think Evan truly learned what respect means that night? Drop your thoughts down in the comments. I read every single one of them. If this story moved you, hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed with the notification bell turned on so you don't miss tomorrow's story. And if you know someone who still believes honor matters, someone who might need a reminder of what dignity really looks like, share this video with them. While you're here, go ahead and check out the other stories appearing on your screen right now. Each one tells a different kind of truth, but they all end the same way, with respect finding its way home. I'll see you tomorrow, same time, with another brand new story.